Cool. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Aftermath Hours, the weekly podcast of Aftermath.site, a worker owned, reader supported website about video games, the internet, and everything that comes after. Aftermath is, for the moment, fully reader supported, so if you like what you hear, you can subscribe at aftermath.site/products. Or if you don't have a ton of money right now, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts. Today, we are talking about all things Assassin's Creed, and also maybe a little bit later, the Discord hack. Um, I am Nathan Grayson, and today I'm joined by Luke Blunkett.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to be back.
Yeah, the long-awaited return of Luke. And we have a special guest, Cameron Kunzelman.
A huge helicopter just flew over my house. It was wild. I don't think
Yeah?
it was picked up by the microphone at all. But yeah, if you saw me looking up, it was like hello, by the way. But it was a real experience just now for me.
Yeah, I didn't hear any helicopters, so.
I can wait. Hold on, I'll give you the. That's kind of what it was like.
Yeah. And yeah, Cameron is here because it just so happens that you are publishing a book about Assassin's Creed next month
right
called
here.
Everything is Permitted.
That's right.
And A, that's just a really cool thing. B, like, because it was really funny. I saw on Blue Sky that you're like, hey, I want to like come on shows, talk about my book. And I was like, great, we've got a guest this week. And then the day after that is when the news broke that there's this Reconstruction-era game that Ubisoft canceled. And I was like, well, that's convenient. What timing? So
I timed it that way. I knew this was coming down. I knew
Yeah,
Chitillo was digging around, and I
you
thought
canceled the game actually. You
yeah.
called up your dear friend Yves Guillemot, and you were like,
That's right.
hey, so that was Reconstruction era game. I don't think that's gonna fly in this current political climate. And
I
he was
said,
like,
Eve, I don't think you can manage this one. Sorry, unfortunately. Sorry to report. I don't think that current Ubisoft is up to the task on this one. I think you should shelve it. I got some podcasts to be on, so if you could do me a solid.
and Eve,
He and his brother.
yeah, Eve, whose confidence is at an all-time low following everything with Tencent and the fact that they just can't manage money, was like, yeah, you're probably right. I should throw in the towel on this one too.
I want to go to the Ubisoft mansions so bad. You know what I mean? You know they got the wildest weird. I imagine it's the 19th century there, right? Like it's got to be buttress ceilings and like weird, like cloth on the wall, and you go, "Wow, what is that? A curtain? No, just a thing in front of the wall." I want to know.
Yeah, I would also like to know that. But, before we speculate too far about the Ubisoft headquarters,
That's right.
okay, so how did this book come about, and why did you decide to focus on Assassin's Creed specifically, a series that has obviously been around for a very long time, that maybe even, people have started to feel like is past its kind of expiration date in terms of relevance?
Yeah, no one would do it. Is part of it. That's not the only reason, but yeah, a few years ago, I guess maybe during 2020, somewhere in that zone, I was asked by an academic editorial team. Um, I was asked about Assassin's Creed, and it just kind of spun up from there, going into that, and eventually what I realized is that a lot of people talk about Assassin's Creed, and I say this in the book too, so a little bit of a preview, but a lot of people talk about Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed and the Ubisoft open world model dominates a lot of discourse, right? To the point where like Ubisoft game is its own discrete category of thing. But there's not a lot of academic research on it, and certainly not a lot of academic research on the thing at scale, as opposed to writing about one individual game, give or take. And so I pitched around a little bit and talked with different teams and talked with different publishers and ended up landing with the University of Minnesota Press partially because, not exclusively because, but partially because they'd read a lot of the writing I'd done about it. Right? I think I'm kind of up there with Luke and maybe with Kirk Hamilton and with a couple other people in the sense of I spent about a decade writing about a lot of these games as they came out, and kind of commenting on them regularly. And Jason at University of Minnesota Press had read quite a bit of that stuff, and so he was really excited about it. And so I ended up doing that with the University of Minnesota because we had a general sense. And so the book is split between kind of the first half is big idea stuff. So I got a chapter on conspiracy. I've got a chapter on interfacing and the animus. and some other stuff like that. And then the back half of the book is kind of really specific deep dives and reads. So there's a chapter on the Ezio Auditore trilogy. There's a chapter on the kind of prehistory ones, so the Greece game and the ancient Egypt game and that kind of stuff too. So hopefully it does a lot of stuff for a lot of different people, and it's I think a tricky book in that way that it tries to say a lot of interesting things for a lot of different audiences, and I hope people like that. I think they will.
Hmm. Yeah. When you say like that you're kind of analyzing it from like an academic angle, like to what
Yeah.
extent do you feel like this is a book that is more academic in its leanings versus being like for a general audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you are someone who is listening to this right now and paying attention to what is going on at Aftermath, this is the kind of thing you would expect to read at a website like that, just
Mhm.
with way, way, way more footnotes. So the style and the tone, and all of that stuff is, I would say, it is structured like a piece of games criticism. And there might be, slightly deeper dive sections or whatever, where I really get into the weeds, but it is written for someone who generally cares about this to engage with it. And if you want to really follow that down the rabbit hole, there's a lot of footnotes for you to kind of see where those ideas are coming from. But yeah, it was written very explicitly to push on the kind of tones that I think we all enjoy, which is informative, interesting, and non-exclusionary. It's written for someone who likes Assassin's Creed and wants to learn more about it and think more about it. And so unfortunately, if you're like a huge Assassin's Creed Brotherhood fan, you're probably the most excluded audience for this book, because there's not a lot in there for you. But for the most part, if you like a couple of these games, or you like the whole franchise, or you're anywhere in between, or you just like one of them, the book is readable and accessible and kind of reachable for you to see what's going on. So yeah, so it is an academic book. It's coming out of an academic publisher. You do not have to be an academic to read it. And to be frank, part of the reason why I do things like podcasts and write books like this is that I have no interest in reading or writing things that are only for an academic audience at this point, right? Like a very narrow band, and if that kind of thing just honestly doesn't keep my attention very, very much at this point either. So yeah, so
Mhm.
if you're watching this, if you are an Aftermath subscriber, this is a book that you'll enjoy, hopefully.
Mhm. Yeah. How did you pick the specific games that you decided to focus on in chapters that are sort of dedicated to, the second you said it, the Ezio section, the prehistory stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah, like why those particular ones, especially given that, like, I mean, there are a ton of these games.
yeah,
There's ones that took place in early America. There's the more recent one, Shadows, which is set in like kind of, feudal Japan. They've run quite a gamut at this point. And so, like, it sounds like some of the ones that you picked, because the Ezio trilogy, I feel like, is very foundational to what the series would become. Like, the first
yeah.
game was sort of, you know, a series of experiments. It wasn't that cohesive. And then the Ezio trilogy was where they're like, okay, this is what an Assassin's Creed game is. Is
Yeah.
that sort of why you started there?
I want to come up with like a smarter answer to this question, but the reality is, like everyone who writes a book, and as you well know, you end up focusing on the things you think are the most interesting. Like
Mhm.
fundamentally, in some like there's a really selfish way that, at least in my experience, that books get produced, which is like I'm going to spend less time on things I don't care about. It's hard for me to focus on that. So there are extensive deep dives, yeah, into Assassin's Creed 2 and Revelations, which I like a lot. There's a really deep dive on Black Flag. Um,
Mm.
there's a really big deep dive on those kind of the ancient history kind of games, because I find those really interesting. And so yeah, I ended up focusing really just on the ones that did the most for me in terms of thinking through them. Assassin's Creed 1 gets a lot of talk. If only because it's the one that's so transparent about its references and the things it grabs onto. So the way that people who read the book will get a longer version of this, but the entirety, my opinion, having reconstructed some things historically and looking at the references and reading a lot of interviews to see where these ideas came from, I think the entirety of the backstory of the Assassins and the Templars, as developed in that first game, really came from one book written in the I think initially in the 60s and then republished in the 70s. And everything about the Assassins and Templars is in the first 25 pages of the book, right? Like it is that level of like it's this book by Archon Dural on secret societies. And you read it and you're like, this is just all the information as presented about these like ancient conspiracies, and it's in the first, fifth of the book or sixth of the book. So some of the what I end up writing about comes from that of doing the big, thinking I was going to do the big like run around. Oh, what's going on with the way the animus works across all these games? And then kind of recognizing, oh, actually the referential material, the things they're in conversation with, the things that the games are interested in is actually coming from a very specific resource or a very specific kind of reference. And what do I do with that? And how do I kind of pull that forward to show people like what are the roots here? It was really beneficial too. And some of the way that I end up focusing the book, um, came from the fact that number one, there's a lot of interviews. Like lots of people, thousands of people have worked on Assassin's Creed, and lots of people who have worked on those games have talked about working on those games. So there's some really fun tracing that I got to do there. But the other part is that as I was writing the book, the Assassin's Creed 15th anniversary book came out, which is Ubisoft telling its own story about the history of these games and their
And it's got to
references or
be
whatever.
biased, to say the least.
Yeah, right. And so it is this kind of hagiography of like, look how good we did and look how great this is, but also what is not in that book was really interesting, or the way. So for example, Liberation and Freedom Cry, which are these games that in terms of the academic literature, in terms of the discussion about these games, are actually really big despite being smaller games. Freedom Cry being initially a DLC that got kind of spun off into its own app that you can purchase. And the same thing happened with Liberation being a PSP game and then coming out, or Vita game, sorry. And then coming out, for consoles or non-handheld consoles later. Those games have had like a very bizarrely, for their size and the development resources put behind them, they've had a really outsized impact. And the vast majority, well, maybe not at this point, but for a while, the majority of academic literature on these games really focused on those two games and just a couple other ones. Those each get one page in the Assassin's Creed 15 book, because they're not really in that narrative that Ubisoft tells. They're not central games. There's a really interesting thing that happens in that book around Assassin's Creed Unity, where they say, it's these developers, francophone developers, and they're saying, we had some really intensive in-office conversations about how the French Revolution should be portrayed, and these were the most the most in-depth conversations about politics and the history of the franchise that we've ever done. And then you read that, you read that as someone writing a book, and you go, well, yeah, because you're French, right? Like you had intensive conversations about that. But however, there are really intensive conversations like that to be had about every historical era. You just didn't have them, maybe, right? And so there was some really interesting stuff. I was really happy to write the book. I might have actually even been done with the book by the time that came out. But I was really happy. I wasn't, I hadn't turned the draft in yet. And so it was great to have that come out and be like, oh, this is a really good way of getting under some of these issues and looking at their own narrative and seeing that. So yeah, people should buy my book first. But if you're interested in how they tell that story, that Assassin's Creed 15 book is actually really interesting. You have a copy of
Yeah.
it behind you?
I was just checking.
Oh,
I'm
wait.
pretty sure I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It is. It is exactly as described. It is just
Yeah.
a very sleek coffee table book of. Didn't we make some really cool games with some really cool art? Let's recap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, what if you got to make an explainer video about your own thing? There's something fun about that.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
yeah.
there's certainly something very appealing about that, I'm sure, to a company, especially one like Ubisoft, which, has a lot of things that I think they'd rather not talk about,
Yeah,
especially in recent
and
years.
I can't speak directly to it. But I think around that time is when the rumors were happening around Ubisoft kind of packaging itself to be sold to someone else. That was one
Hmm.
of the times. And so I do kind of think in some ways that book was a little bit about being like, well, look what we've got. Look at our like big IP that we have that you might be interested in acquiring. And I don't know if that's true or not, but it kind of is weird for those things to kind of land at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah. Earlier you mentioned that because you talked about the fact that the book focuses on things that you find interesting. You
Mhm.
mentioned two parts of the Ezio trilogy. You also said that it's not really for Brotherhood fans.
Yeah.
So spicy question: why do you hate Assassin's Creed Brotherhood?
I don't think it's very good. I Uh, I mean, like the real fan answer here is that Assassin's Creed 2 is this really interesting and long form meditation on the hollowness of revenge and how much that won't. No matter how many times you get to kick the Pope in the crotch, right at the end of the game. Ultimately, it's not about you. You know, the spoilers for a game that's more than a decade old at this point, but you know, uh, you get to have that moment, right, where the Isu looks through the character and at you as the audience. There's all kinds of interesting and fun stuff that happens there in that game. And then if you play them in sequence, you immediately boot up Brotherhood, which is like, what if you had to fight the weirdest people from the Renaissance? What if they were perverts? You know, and it's just like, I don't know if that's what if they killed your uncle? It takes what is I think a surprisingly, in a positive way, a surprisingly sophisticated story about revenge that happens in Assassin's Creed 2 and immediately puts it in a different revenge genre and then asks you to do like a whole bunch of like very boring quests around that. And I know that people love it because they like to like complete things on a map. I totally get
Mhm.
that. That is not the thing that I'm in these games for. And so I don't care so much for that, but I like the one after that. I thought it was really good.
Hmm. Luke, were you a Brotherhood person back in the day? Did you like that game, or did you also find it kind of
Yeah,
weird?
because I really just I initially bounced off. It had a lot of weird stuff like tower defensey kind of like extra stuff thrown in, which
Mhm.
looked repulsive on like the marketing bullet point sheet, but is one of the first Assassin's Creed games to sort of get me criminally addicted to like the map bullshit that you just referenced of like,
Yeah.
oh, look, I'm going to take a break from killing some guys and go and just do some other map stuff. And then I'll get back to it. And it had a cool setting. I'm a sucker for Assassin's Creed settings. Like I will
Mhm.
indulge in Assassin's Creed games failures if I'm allowed to walk very slowly and methodically down a street of an interesting historical city. And Brotherhood setting definitely had that too. So yeah. But it's not one of my favorites. I did enjoy
Mhm.
it, but it's not like, I know you mentioned, Cameron, that there's game criticism elements in your book. I don't think there's my favorite Assassin's Creed games ranked chapter.
There's not.
There's not, no, no. If we were doing that now live, Brotherhood would not be near the top. But like I liked it. It was good.
Mhm. Um, I mean, you were talking about, how that was the first time that I guess you got hooked on some of the map game elements. Like especially in terms of the book and how it sort of charts this entire thing. When did we go from kind of like, okay, Assassin's Creed, there are these games, they're fun to play, or like they're fairly interesting as far as AAA games go, to like this is setting the standard for the map game genre, for the idea of a map game.
I the trickiness of writing an academic book is like I completed this thing a year ago.
Mhm.
And so I imagine in the book I make some sort of wild claim about when that happened. You know what I mean? I imagine in my
Mhm.
mind I have like picked a time period. I would
Mhm.
say that it's somewhere between Assassin's Creed 2 and 3 actually coming out, right? And like a bunch of other stuff is happening here too, right? Like the fact that Grand Theft Auto never receded even one moment from like the public imagination up until today, right? That it still does that stuff means that
Mhm.
like what is the primary place that like the map game is appearing is always bouncing off this other massive open world franchise that people like never get away from. But and not just franchise, but game,
Mhm.
like Grand
Yeah,
Theft Auto
I
is
think
just
a
like this
key thing to
dominant
keep in
weird
mind,
thing.
though,
Yeah.
on that front is like, Assassin's Creed is the game with the towers, the game that first started doing
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
Grand Theft Auto has never, to my knowledge, had towers. I mean, even like Zelda added towers, like all these
Yeah.
games kind of use that as the template in that regard.
Yeah.
Um,
Of
yeah.
unlocking the map and all of that stuff. I mean, if I think Assassin's Creed 2 sets the standard for what that's going to look like, and you see a lot of people replicating that. I think the actual real innovation there in terms of maybe predictability or shape is I saw this looking at a lot of developer interviews for Black Flag, which is that there's this injection of novelty. And so rather than thinking about the map itself or thinking about distribution of objects or whatever, it is how often will something that is surprising to you or worth engaging with, what is the gap of time between those events happening, right? And so by the time we get to Black Flag, I have the numbers in the book, but it gets somewhere down to 20 seconds or 25 seconds. So if one were to travel in a straight line in the game,
Mhm.
what is the time in between something interesting happening? And it gets down to less than a minute or less than half a minute, right? And so if you were to ask me like what makes these games them and what makes like an Ubisoft map game that's visually communicated often through a map. It's a thing you can look at and you can plot your thing, your movement between those 2 points or any given points. But in reality, what that is facilitating is around every corner there is a new activity for you to do. There's a new
Mhm.
feather to collect, or there's a new whale to hunt, or a new ship to attack, or whatever. And that obviously, if you look at the games in their sequence, that becomes the dominant paradigm of how these games are kind of produced and thought of, which is what is the frequency and what is the rhythm of your time having something to sink into. And it's
Mhm.
something I talk about in the book, and I've talked about this in everything I've written about Assassin's Creed for a while, is that I ended up looking at a lot of investor reports and things like that for Ubisoft. And this book kind of started initially a little bit as a follow the money style book of like, what is this and how does it work? And that kind of wasn't the final shape it ended in, but there is still some of that in there. And what's really notable to me in the kind of post mobile game world is everyone starts to evaluate their games based on essentially time on device, right? So, like, what is the amount of time per week or month or year that someone is spending in these games? And so, after Valhalla came out, there were a couple investor reports, to my memory, that Ubisoft is reporting engagement in that way. Of
Hmm.
this is how much collective time people put into that thing. Did y'all see Blackberry? Did you see the movie Blackberry?
I didn't
Okay,
know.
number one. All right, everybody, you got to be watching Blackberry. Number
Okay.
one.
Okay.
But a big maneuver that gets made in that that is really helpful is there's a moment when someone is telling someone else, we are no longer selling minutes for cell phones. We are selling data plans. And I think it's when the iPhone is released, right?
Hmm.
And the line in the movie, which is brilliant, is there's only 1 minute in a minute. And I think that, right, so like data, there's a lot of
Hmm.
data in a given minute, right? But there's only 1 minute in a minute. So if you sell data, it's a much more profitable place.
Uh,
And that's really how I see the kind of map game operating, right? Which is
mhm.
like there's only 1 minute in a minute. So we need to produce all of this stuff that you can sink these minutes into. The more you spend minutes with our thing, the less you're spending minutes with other things. And the Assassin's Creed games and Ubisoft games in general are a really interesting canary in the coal mine for that, alongside mobile gaming, because that's everything now.
Hmm.
There's a reason that Netflix currently talks about second screen content, right? Their
Mhm.
belief is that you're not even looking at it. It is a thing for you to be listening to and half paying attention to while you do something on your phone. Um, and these game companies and Ubisoft is thinking through this stuff. And if you read those investor reports and you kind of pay attention to the way they talk about themselves, they want to capture that whole minute. They want to be demonstrating that people are kind of putting all their effort and time and thought into that. And map design, that goes all the way back to the map game, I think,
Mhm.
right? That's the early indicator of we're going to give you so much to do. There's going to be so many icons, and you're going to feel so good about completing those things. Luke, you're talking about that. That's the Brotherhood innovation, right? It's like I'm going to feel good by clearing this section of the map, but it's in order to eat your time, and it's in order to pull you into the orbit of the device. And what's great about Assassin's Creed as a franchise, and why I wrote a book about the franchise, is that you can watch it happen beat by beat. You can look at 15-ish games at this point and watch nearly yearly the progression toward the world we live in today. Um, the games industry of the games industry of 2007 to now is a different universe, right? I know
Mhm.
that we have
Absolutely.
continuity of people and companies or whatever, but just the anyone who was around back then remembers it's just a radically different universe. And there are the video game franchise is one of the really cool ways that we can trace that and watch that transformation happen. And my hope is that on the academic side and anyone who wants to do this, my hope is that writing a book on the Assassin's Creed franchise helps open the door to people writing about other things like this, right? Like, I desperately want to read the Halo franchise book, like
Oh man, that'd be
desperately in my
amazing.
heart, right? Because it allows you to do the same thing, but it allows you to do it in a different way of looking at how has multiplayer changed? How's the relationship between studios and their ownership companies? How does the relationship between a company and IP? How have those things all changed? So yeah, that's like a different answer than the question you asked, but I think it goes back to the maps in some way, right? Like
Mhm.
if you follow the way the map game kind of operates and changes and moves, you get to watch the whole industry change around it from that initial kernel.
Yeah.
Does that make Origins then like people often look at Origins as this sort of very pivotal game in the series in
Yeah,
terms of narrative and setting and overall structure. People say, "Oh, it's the first real open world one."
yeah,
But if Valhalla was the first game where they were actively tracking engagement metrics, does that make Origins? Because Origins was the first game to also bring in that drip feed, time spent. We want to keep you in this game stuff that the previous games didn't have, where they would
yeah.
make you log in through Uplay and they'd keep
Hmm.
offering skins and they'd want you to be buying stuff in game and they'd keep offering updates and little storylines. And they'd 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, they'd want you playing the same game so
Yeah,
that they're tracking those minutes. So that makes really what you're saying makes Origins maybe the most pivotal game in the franchise's history because we
yeah.
fans will look at it in terms of its structure, but economically and design wise for Ubisoft, then it's clearly like the most important as well. It's like
Oh
almost
yeah.
a clean BC AD break between the series, between sort of what came before and what's happening now.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And when I mentioned Valhalla as the first one there, it's certainly not the first place that they're highlighting those numbers and talking about engagement. And I do think it starts with the beginning of the Layla Hassan games. There's something interesting that you make a new trilogy with a new economic model, kind of foregrounded underneath it. I think yes, I think all that kind of starts back with Origins, and probably it starts earlier. But by the time you get to Valhalla, it is such a major part of the self narration of Ubisoft and of the franchise. And I think for the reason for that is that Valhalla broke $1 billion revenue, right? Or at least claimed. And so I think that there's in some ways Valhalla is the one that gets highlighted by them so much because it demonstrates the thing we started with Origin has reached its apex here with this multi-year 3-4 year long support cycle on it that has daily content and weekly content associated with it that really is demonstrating a very strong not only just drip feed of stuff but like a fire hose of stuff that is monetizable at all times. And Valhalla, is it the first one that had like the store that would allow you to get stuff from the other Layla Hassan games? I don't think the other two Layla Hassan.
Oh, look, opening the store for that Valhalla was a psychologically damaging experience that I only
Yeah.
did for like professional. The first time I saw there were Halloween skins for the game, I was like, I'm never opening this again. This is
Yeah.
I don't enjoy being around this, but yeah, I'm sure it did. Look, I'm gonna unequivocally say I'm sure it did. I'm sure it had skins for everything you can think of because that game was out for so long, getting stuff
Yeah.
pumped into it for so long.
Yeah, that's a fascinating game, and the thing that's again tricky about writing a book like this is every game in the franchise could support 250 pages of serious writing about it, and so
Yeah. When thousands of people
picking
work
the
on anything,
yeah,
I
of
mean,
course,
it,
right,
it can
and
support
like
one
s-
book, if not
like
more
thousands
than
of
one.
people who have strong opinions and like are willing to ping off of other things. You know what I mean? Like each
Yeah.
book or each game is kind of an argument for why Assassin's Creed should exist, and so there's a real diligence to pulling those things apart.
Yeah. Now that part's
And so yeah,
interesting too,
yeah,
because I think I agree. Like I've never heard anybody phrase it that way. It's like each game is an argument for the series existing. But I think that I agree, if only because like, every time there's a new sequel in a series like this that is quote unquote formulaic, you've got to put in enough new things to justify like, yeah, now there's another game in the series.
yeah.
And also, you've got to modernize it because these games take time to make, so it's got to be up to
Mhm.
speed with various genre conventions, whatever might have come after. Um, but like, I think that that's especially come to the forefront recently. Like, I think that Shadows was kind of, especially because Ubisoft took a break for a minute there. It was like the most explicit argument yet for the series existing or continuing to exist. It was like,
Mhm.
yeah, we got to come out swinging because people now think these games are long in tooth.
Yeah. I gotta be honest, did not play that game.
Really?
Book was done before. So I played through several of the games 3 times and all
Mm.
of them twice.
Hmm.
and it took literally. I mean, I counted up the hours; it's thousands of hours, and the book was in already when Shadows came out. And actually, I turned the book in before Mirage was out,
Huh.
and I actually just had like a stub in the text that was like, when the draft review comes out, I will write about Mirage here. I have like 4 pages or whatever to do. And so yeah, so I by the time that Shadows came out, I was just profoundly burned out of playing these games.
Yeah.
I just and so I'm in some ways, and I've heard really positive and interesting stuff about it. And so I am waiting for that moment where the itch comes back, and that'll be like the time I get to go back to Shadows. But yeah, that is what you just said is kind of how I've understood it, which is much like Origins was hey, we exist, we continue to make these, we're
Hmm.
revolutionizing the format. It does seem like Shadows is doing a similar thing.
Yeah. Well, also because, Ubisoft was in fairly dire financial straits, especially before all the Tencent stuff, and
Yeah.
they needed a hit. They had a bunch of flops, and so they're like, okay, Assassin's Creed Shadows. That's why they delayed it. They're like, it's got to be the thing. If it's
Yeah.
not, then
Did
we're
you
kind
play it?
of
Did you play it though, Nathan? Did you finish
yeah.
Shadows?
I didn't
Because
finish
I
it. I think I have like 30 hours in it. I liked what I played actually quite a
yeah.
bit.
It's funny
Um,
though, because you mentioned that stuff about how all Ubisoft needed to show it was still relevant and built it up as this big new thing. I remember my last blog, I think, on about the game was that it wasn't. It's like you play through Shadows, and it's actually
no,
an
it's still
incredibly
very similar
conventional. It's a
to
very conventional Assassin's Creed game,
yeah.
yeah. And so it's really surprising that they went so hard on this being like this modernized, updated, new
Well, and
generation
also
of
like
Assassin's Creed games. And then it's like, oh, it's an Assassin's Creed game, which is fine. Like they're
yeah.
good, solid, dependable video games.
Well,
But the
right. It's
disconnect
like
between
because
that
they
and
took a
what we
little
got was like really funny.
yeah, because they took a little time off from like the big ones. I mean, I know Mirage came out to kind of fill the gap, but because they
Yeah.
took time off from the big ones, it was sort of like a "Did you miss me?" moment. Like, because I
Hmm.
hadn't played one of those games in a couple of years, I was like, "Oh, I did kind of miss this." It's comfortable in a way that I had thought that I was over, but actually, as it turns out, like a warm blanket's still a warm blanket. You're gonna eventually be like, "Yeah, this is nice. This is cozy." Um, but yeah, it was weird in that a lot of the things that they advertised as like kind of the biggest new features or like these things that were going to be totally game changing are either not really that important or like very missable. Like the seasonal stuff is like it's neat, but like it
Yeah.
doesn't really alter your playstyle that much. It can if you want it to, but it's not like you gotta like completely alter how you approach this area because it's winter. It's just like okay, well it's there. Um, but no,
It's
getting
very
back to
this is very AAA game development in 2025 though, really.
right,
Like
but yeah, because you can't alienate the base.
Yeah.
Um, but getting back to the idea of a map game, because
Mhm.
especially if we're talking about Shadows, a game where like I loved exploring the map, or at least like taking in the sights. I think divorced from map game moments. Like
Mhm.
I would be on my way to somewhere, or maybe not really going anywhere. I just like slow down and kind of look around, watch the sunrise and like these gorgeous like fields, and like these really amazing reconstructions of feudal Japan. But you're talking about having all these objectives and all these things and like 25 seconds or whatever between interesting things occurring. When we're talking about the map game, do you think that the conventions of the genre and like needing to be entertaining at all times undercut the maps themselves just because they're these like gorgeously low realized recreations, but you're always like focusing on a little icon on a map or on a thing to do instead of just being like, whoa, look at that, whoa, look at that. Like all
Yeah.
of it sort of blends together if you're playing the game as intended.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has always been a war between those two disciplines within AAA game development, especially in like the kind of Ubi style game. Far Cry has this exact same issue, right? Where the thing you are looking at is often beautiful, and then like you have to you got to watch people just like drive through it or whatever,
Hmm.
or you like have random fights in the woods constantly, or like a bear attacks you, or there's like a thing to pick up on the ground. There's a way that it's like, what if you went on a hike and you had to look at your feet all the time? That's kind of how these games can feel, and I think that that is a basic struggle. And you were talking about kind of Ubisoft, and I think we extrapolate from that the games industry, especially the AAA kind of big blockbuster industry, is going through bad times right now. We're like looking for money. ROI is really hard to find across the board. There's a lot of skepticism about like, can we fund a really large game and actually make a large amount of profit out of it, which used to be very predictable. 10 years ago was much more predictable. It feels like. And I think that the struggle there is, on one hand, it's got to look a particular way and it has to really wow the eye and it has to impress people in a very basic visual way, because that's how you demonstrate where the money is, right? Like
Mhm.
that's Michael Bay shows all the money on the screen by showing you all the things explode, right? Because that's like how you know that the thing cost a lot of money and there's all the skill and investment and time behind it. But the reality is that you need to demonstrate that you can make people engage with it for extensive amounts of time and put more money into it to buy those skins or to engage in those processes that you were talking about, Luke. The thing that made Valhalla get $1 billion. And so I think that's the real struggle. At one point, I think those things in the Assassin's Creed games, they had a kind of equivalence or parity behind them. You know, that you were selling someone on buying Black Flag because it's this really cool, expansive game about sailing the ocean, and the visual wonder of that was the thing that you were buying in order to embrace the fantasy of piracy or whatever. But and that's where the money came from, was giving people the aesthetic enjoyment of the fantasy, because what you wanted to do was sell copies of games. Now you want to give people the wonder in order to sell them microtransactions, or various other weird stuff around it, which is like a difference in profitability model or a difference in thinking about it. There was a time when Assassin's Creed said all of the extra money is going to come from transmedia stuff, right? We're gonna develop the brand, we're gonna develop it through the games, but there's going to be this huge universe of monetizability across comics and movies and all this kind of stuff. And that didn't work. It just didn't go. They did all of that stuff and it was not, I mean, I've never seen the numbers behind it, and the number aggregates um are not really available in the investor reports because they're kind of different companies involved. They're licensing to one another. But based on what I've seen, based on people I've talked to, based on the stuff I wrote in the book, the transmedia promise just didn't cash out. Like, at the end of the day, it is more profitable to be making a microtransaction heavy mobile game than it is to make Assassin's Creed comic books. Like, there's just there's not a competition between those things. And so, yeah, I think the tension that you're pointing out, Nathan, is a tension that has always existed, but is made so much more stark, I think, because of the way that monetization has changed. Where does the
Mhm.
money come from when you make a video game now is a different answer than it was in 2007. Like, way different answer than it was in 2007.
Mhm. Well, actually, to transition into talking about more modern Assassin's Creed, one place that the money comes from now, apparently, is Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, which is very interesting because I think that we have, especially as of this week, this contrast in kind of the goals of the series are what it's willing to do, right? Because on
Yeah.
one hand, at least according to reports, the new Assassin's Creed Mirage DLC, which unto itself is an outlier in that that game has been out for a couple years, and now they're also going to release a DLC suddenly, was funded by Saudi Arabia,
Mhm.
which that feels like it should be maybe disqualifying, at least from a business perspective, because there'll be a lot of controversy around it. Ubisoft went ahead with that. Ubisoft, according to a report from GameFile published this week, was also working on a Reconstruction-era Assassin's Creed game,
Mhm.
in which you played a freed slave. And they canceled that in part due to the current political climate, because they're worried about backlash, also because there was, obviously a lot of outcry surrounding Yasuke in Assassin's Creed Shadow. He was a black samurai. It's just interesting to sort of, I guess, juxtapose these things, considering that both come with a level of risk politically, but they picked one and not the other.
Yeah, I think that from a certain perspective, those look like equivalent risks. I don't know from the business world perspective if
Yeah,
those
well, I
look
mean,
like
because one
equivalent
gets you a
risks,
lot of
right?
money for sure, and the other one means if the game does well, you'll make money.
Well,
Yeah, like one
and
is obviously less of a risk than the other.
I mean, the business world is just very clearly willing to play ball with Saudi Arabia, right? And
Mm.
like that's whatever one has an opinion on there. Um, the reality is like they've made lots and lots of partnerships across lots and lots of different sectors that have been variously critiqued in lots of different ways. I feel relatively certain if Ubisoft thought there would be a strong trade-off to their bottom line, they would not have done it. I don't even know if it's necessarily like the money on the table so good issue, right?
Mhm.
I think it's mostly this is that I from all my reading and my reading around the way that these investment groups have been making their investments, I don't think that from their perspective, this is a toxic association. Whereas I think for many commentators, they have immediately asserted that it is a toxic association.
Mhm.
And so I think Ubisoft's perspective on that's just radically different. The other thing about the Reconstruction game, and I was talking about this on social media a little bit. I wish they tried it, on some level. On the other hand, zero faith that that would have been a thing that had any kind of depth or seriousness to it. I take very seriously um, the stakes of the representation of Reconstruction in America. It is a time period that is still really fought over and
Yeah.
really deeply and
And
seriously
taught really
discussed,
poorly in schools,
if
horrifically
taught at all.
misunderstood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I don't think that do. I think that right. I grew up in Georgia. I live in Georgia. Do I think that Ubisoft would have accomplished anything better than the baseline education that I received, which now as an adult I know was both wrong and horrifically wrong, in ways that were had a definite racial animus around them?
Mhm.
No, I just don't, right? And so I think the game, I would have liked to seen the attempt. I also am very wary about what the result would have looked like. I also think that maybe, and this is pure speculation and also pure opinion, right? Just as someone who's played a lot of these games and knows a little bit about Reconstruction, a little bit about Ubisoft development methods, now having thought about it for a while and read a lot about it. Um, Nearly every Ubisoft Assassin's Creed game has had a very troubled development and a
Mhm.
well documented troubled development. Um, so is it that they thought it was politically toxic to put out, right? That would offend some number of fans who would not be on board?
Yeah, or
Maybe.
not even, I mean, to be clear, not even fans, it's that
Yeah,
same roving
right. Yeah.
group of like,
Commentators, people
yeah,
who monetize
grievance-driven
that. Yeah,
individuals. Yeah, like they
right.
don't even buy these games. They
Um,
don't actually give a shit. It's just a new culture war thing for them.
but let's even assume
Yeah.
like the best case scenario. They think they will alienate real fans, right?
Okay. Okay.
Let's give the narrative, right? Is that I'm not sure that we should buy the PR necessarily, even on a leaked report coming from Totillo, right? Like who I
Mhm.
trust on these issues. It is just as likely to me that this game was seeing profoundly troubled development in the way that Ubisoft games have historically seen troubled
Mhm.
development in many different ways. That it wasn't cohering and coming out. And doesn't it feel very convenient to blame a possible speculative political response as
Mhm.
opposed to taking seriously that your development method might have some long running serious flaws that are well developed? Like I take I take the way that Totillo kind of put it in that write up. I take that seriously, and I think that's important. And I think it's important for us to think about who are the groups of people who would make the most grievance and most outcry about this. I also think that is a deeply convenient narrative for Ubisoft to push in order to explain dumping a bunch of toxic assets to their um, investors, right? To be like,
Mhm.
look, sorry, we just had to, yeah, sure, we're 2 years in on this project and we've sunk a huge amount of money into it, but also like probably wouldn't have made a lot of money anyway. So that's easier to sell to investors, I think,
Mhm.
than it is to say, we couldn't get it together and we're deep or even like medium of the way into development on a project that we can't see through to the end. Which
Yeah.
again, there are several of these games that if you just follow the public discussion around them
Mhm.
and the public discussion that have been had by developers who have left them, they barely got over the finish line.
Right.
They
Right.
really and
Yeah,
truly
which is
left them.
also like every AAA game now. But yeah,
Yeah.
to your point, Ubisoft has employed this multi-studio approach for all of their major
Mhm.
productions for years,
Oh yeah.
where many games are touched by over 1,000 different hands,
Yep.
which is always like, going to be very fragmented and will lead to more potential bottlenecks and also more places where the whole process can break down. And then suddenly you're like, do we even have a game? Or like, what is this? What have we made? So yeah, I get that. And then yeah, if Ubisoft would have to go to investors and say, we've realized that actually like our framework, our scaffolding is bad. That's going to send people running for the hills. Whereas this is just like, no,
Yeah.
we've actually exercised intelligent and wise judgment in reading the current climate and deciding that this is not, maybe the best course of action. So I
Right.
I
And
can
maybe that's
understand that
true, right?
thinking.
But doesn't that feel so convenient to you? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it feels like putting the blame specifically on our audience will respond in XYZ way feels, and maybe that's true, right? Like two things can be
Mm.
true at one time.
Yeah, yeah.
But I
And they
mean,
often are.
yeah, and just think about the cases that Ubisoft is currently progressing through French court right now, specifically around their development process and the way that that is shaken out and the personalities involved and the claims being brought against people at that company. Um, I think the way you just phrased it is an appropriate skepticism to have.
Mhm.
This makes them get to look like they make very wise decisions uh, for a company that we know has struggled to make wise decisions in the past. And in
Mhm.
fact, as you talked about repeatedly earlier, has had financial issues because of that.
Yeah.
Because so I don't know. I mean, I find that is really interesting. Um, I would like to hear more. I would like to hear more reporting on it beyond what we have seen so far. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because also like keeping in mind too that we're in a place right now where despite everything, and like, they pulled it off, right? They made the deal with Tencent. But for a minute, especially, the whole idea was like, okay, Ubisoft has long been a family run company. It's been in the hands of the Guillemots. But like they needed to make an argument as to why it should stay that way, following all the scandals in the early 2020s and then financial issues following. It's like, okay, so wait, why should these people still be in charge? And they managed to, keep their hand on the wheel after all of this. They got a cash infusion. They spun
Yeah.
off their main series into something co-run with Tencent.
To
But up to
something that
that
is
point,
it's still a family-run business.
yeah, well, no, it's Luke. Tencent joined the family. Tencent's last name is
That's right.
Guillemot now.
Yeah.
I mean,
Tencent married in.
I was also referring to the new spin-off company's leadership somehow being involved. Didn't you write that post?
Yes, I wrote the blog about it's
The
the
Nepo
Nepo
baby
baby
post.
saying that
Yep.
don't worry, I'm not a Nepo baby. Yeah, it was really phenomenal stuff because it's one of what Eve's sons. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Um,
Crusader
Look,
Kings shit. You can just pull a line of succession out and just put them into
yeah.
the lower roles. It's amazing.
I can't believe y'all are skeptical of the idea that one family could just know how to do it. I don't. They're uniquely gifted at it, right? Like
yeah,
some people are
it's
good at wrestling, other people are good at making Ubisoft games. I don't know what to
yeah,
tell you.
it's called the Mandate of Heaven. It's been around forever,
Yeah,
and it's very reliable.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Um, I think what I want to do today is actually transition straight into the mailbag from here, if only because uh, Cameron doesn't have a ton of time left, and there's at least like one or two questions in there that are addressed to Cameron. We were gonna talk about the Discord hack some. TLDR, it's really bad. Everything that people were worried about came to pass when it involving ID or real ID and platforms. Of course it did. Somebody hacked Discord. There are, according to a 404 report, pictures of people like because basically the group that did it is trying to extort Discord, so they're leaking material. There are people selfies holding up their IDs, all of that. Yeah. Anyone could have seen this coming, but still, governments and companies insisted on going forward with it for better surveillance. Yeah. Anyway, now we talked about it. How fun. On to the mailbag. So, for those who do not know, the mailbag is in our Discord. If you'd like to gain access to the Discord, you can subscribe at aftermath.site/products to our member tier. And if you do that, you can submit questions to it every week. We also have a whole bunch of other stuff happening in there. It's a great place, so I recommend it. Anyway, I'm going to jump straight to the part that's addressed to Cameron because it's actually just a really nice message from Mectroid. Seeing Cameron is on, I have to thank him and his co-host for Homestuck Made This World. It single-handedly taught me the art of reading critically, and for that, I'm eternally grateful. So there you go.
I have no comment. Thank you for the nice compliment. I have no comment on Homestuck.
Cool.
I've gotten in trouble by merely speaking my mind before on
That's
Homestuck. Glad you
totally
enjoyed the
fair.
show.
All right. Anyways, the actual question. Been thinking about the Manbreaker from oh my god, why am I blanking on the
Baby
name?
steps.
From
Huh.
Baby Steps. Um, been thinking about the Manbreaker and the video game equivalent of quote unquote eating your vegetables. Are there other parts of games that you'd recommend? Not recommended the form, even if they may be unpleasant experiences.
Oh yeah. Uh yeah, that's the good part of games, right? Isn't that the good part of games, like all the unpleasant parts?
It depends on who
Uh
you ask.
yeah.
Let's see. Um, you know what? This is kind of a weird one because I don't think fundamentally I think it's actually a pretty frictionless game. But the parts that involve friction are good. And no one ever talks about this game except for me and Chris sometimes. Asura's Wrath, which
Hmm.
was this like, yeah, kind of
Yeah. The FMV game.
QTE
Yeah.
heavy anime game. It was like a shonen anime series, but turned into a video game. Came out in like 2010, somewhere thereabout. Some of the QTEs were incredibly unpleasant because you had to fucking wail on that thing until it physically hurt you. But that was to express where the character was at in this interesting way. You felt pain, he felt pain. It's pretty like straightforward and basic. It kind of like also recalls the like microwave hallway Metal Gear Solid 4, where
Mhm.
similarly you just like have to mash something and you're like, oh my god, this like hurts like shit. This is harming me. But like that overlap, getting to physically experience that unpleasantness, I think drives home the point that the game is trying to make. So yeah, those two for an atypical answer, because the typical answer would be like Dark Souls, difficulty, blah blah blah, and like, who cares?
I've written about this somewhere. I don't remember. Oh, maybe I wrote like an academic article about Dark Souls a few years ago. But that narrative around Dark Souls, uh, it is in the first review of the game that came out for the New York Times. Maybe I think maybe Simon Parkin did it. I can't
Mhm.
remember. And it's also on the back of the box. And like there's some part of me that's like, if the game if the game's PR is telling you it's about like self-mastery and improvement, perhaps we should think slightly differently about, like, maybe let's not just like take the PR line, right? So like,
Yeah.
yes, let's dismiss with Dark Souls. I think the unpleasant part that's good for you is having to solve all the puzzles in Riven, a sequel to Myst. Those puzzles
Mhm.
are hard as shit. And not in the remake, in the original version.
Mhm.
That's my what is the good part of unpleasantness. It's like having to like read a bunch of journals and then write a bunch of stuff down. That's good.
Can I
Yeah.
quickly say sports games? Sports
Yeah, hell
games, when
yeah.
you play the career mode in a sports game, you are playing so I play a lot of football games for some reason. Still, I have problems. Please help. You're playing FIFA slash EAFC. If you play a Premier League season, there are 38 games in a Premier League season. And if you're playing as a good team, you're playing more games in European football. You can be up to sort of 50, 55 games a season. That is a lot of games of football for one simulated season in a game that you're often simulating multiple seasons. And sports games like to show you highlights and key moments and sort of heartbreaking, pivotal things,
Mhm.
but like you're really talking dozens and then hundreds of hours of football. And just like
Mhm.
the real thing, a lot of that is a grind and a lot of it ends up being meaningless. But you have to, like, I mean, you can simulate it, but that's a coward's way of doing it. You have to play through every game. And so just like real football, there's like some days you just don't want to turn up and some days you just have to play the kids or play the reserves and you just have to fight your way through some boring 1-0 game against some lower league opposition, not because it's something you want to be doing. That's not the kind of football that EA want you to be simulating, but because that's what a career mode involves. And if you want those highs of winning trophies and stuff, you have to go through the slog of playing Sunderland in April and battling for a 1-1 draw away because that secures you some kind of European football or something. And so yeah, that's mine. You have to do that. That is a plate half full of vegetables, but you have to eat all of them
One of
every year.
my one of my favorite gaming experiences is like that. I think it was NHL 16 or 17 gave you the ability to play some of the ranked, I think, middle school teams. and you could play games against other ranked, like, North American ranked middle school teams. So the stats were terrible. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
they're in the teens or whatever, because they're statted compared to professional hockey players. And I played a season of that as, like, in the middle school or high school hockey team, whatever it was, and that was truly like you have to so learn the fundamentals of the thing and just slog through that season. Truly like an Apex gaming experience. Yeah, I sports games I think are a really good run, like, part of that. Racing games, right? Like the more
Mm.
simulationist
Yeah,
racing games.
qualify.
Yeah.
I have a friend who does the qualifying before Formula One races, and I
Yeah.
think he needs serious professional help because that takes it takes so long. I'm like, dude, just simulate it, or like just do one lap. Where there's all these settings where he goes, no, man, I'm racing. I have to qualify. I'm like, my
Yeah.
God, all right. I appreciate your dedication to the craft because like he's a huge Formula One fan, and like that's part of the sport, and so he
Yeah.
wants to simulate the sport, and so like that's his vegetables. He has to eat a bowl full of like broccoli before he can get to the race.
Let's see. All right. Got another message directed at Cameron. Suspiciously, also without a question. Anyway, it's fine.
Oh,
From Ahab. Cameron finished his PhD and left right before I began the same institution. Please let him know that I'm not bitter about that at all.
Is that
Um,
true? Is that true?
Apparently it is.
Wild. What a thing
Yeah.
to hear.
Now the question: what are all of you reading lately?
I'm reading the Forbidden Psalm
Mm.
rule book to play the Forbidden Psalm miniatures game. What else do I got here? I got it's all on my desk, of course. I got the collected nonfiction of Flannery O'Connor here. I'm working on a thing about Flannery O'Connor. I just finished Dice Men,
Hmm.
the origin story of Games Workshop. If you're like a
Ooh.
Warhammer person, or any of those, if you like the fighting fantasy books, there's some really great. I actually just bought this because there are some really great classic miniatures painted in. I wanted to look at it. What else we got here? I got a little shout out to the team that makes Portcullis magazine. It's a zine that I ordered off Instagram, I think.
Damn, it looks really nice.
It's sweet. It's great. Got some great art in here. So you should check out Portcullis magazine. I think that's it. I think that's what I've been reading recently. It all just lives on the desk here.
I've been I'm very bad at reading books these days, like many of us are. Um, I've been trying to start the Hot Dog book by Jamie Loftus.
Mm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, which I bought while I was in Portland, Maine, and I will eventually start it and ideally finish it. And just starting anything is difficult.
starting anything is difficult.
Yeah.
And I'm not wrong. I think that everyone has trouble starting stuff.
In an answer that will surprise nobody, with Europa Universalis 5 coming out, I've realized my knowledge of the 30 Years' War is not as comprehensive as it could be. So I'm reading
Oh.
Peter Wilson's The 30 Years' War: Europe's Tragedy, which is a highly recommended book recapping sort of the ins and outs of one of the most devastating conflicts of European history. So that's some light reading. But to offset that, at the same time, I'm reading issue 6 of Forgotten Worlds, which will probably show up backwards on the stream. But it's a issue just about old Sega magazines, and includes an entire chapter on UK Resistance, one of my favorite websites of all time, for
Ooh.
which other old people might remember. So yeah, I'm offsetting enormous mass human tragedy with retro Sega video game journalism. Trying to anyway.
Oh.
Yeah, honestly, that's a nice balance.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't shout out my biggest book. It was so big I didn't have an opportunity to do it. That's right. I'm reading The Early Architecture of Georgia. That's right.
ooh.
You ever want to see what a cabin looked like in 1880? Look at that. There's an old dog. This dog was born before I was born. Isn't that wild to think about? This house is from 1830. This book smells bad. I have to tell you, I've had it this close to my face. Yeah, it's from like 1950 something.
Wow.
But yeah, that's the other thing I'm reading. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. That's fascinating. I always love a bad smelling book.
It really
Yeah,
smells
dude,
bad.
I'm a book huffer. Like I will huff any any book. If you say that's bad, I am now sitting here like rubbing my hands together, like going, yeah, I need to get hold of that book and give it a good
Next
strong
time,
whiff.
next time you visit America, Luke, you can detour over to Georgia to smell this
Yeah, that's
bad
right.
book. Be like,
Yep.
oh, it lived up to expectations.
I'll
I
put
can
it in
go
a
home
bag
now.
for you, like a
A
hermetically sealed plastic
vacuum
bag.
sealed bag.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Gotta lock
But not the book
the
itself,
smell.
just a bag full of the air from around the book, so I can just
Yeah.
because that's cheaper for postage, and then I can
Now
just
this just sounds like a good idea for like ranged touch merch. You can just sell bags of book air.
Ah,
It
that's
sounds
right.
like a more respectable version of like selling the streamer's bathwater. It's like we can
Yes.
sell old library book smells instead.
I'll sell both. I don't have any issue with like if you like why would you limit your market? I'll sell book air,
That's
I'll
true.
sell
True.
bathwater. I don't care.
Yeah, don't throw the book air out with the bathwater.
That's right.
Anyway, also if Cameron, if you need to go now, feel free. Otherwise, we have more questions in the mailbag, or at least a few more. It's your call.
I got another no one has sent me a message yet that they're waiting on me, so I got another 10 minutes or so, probably.
Okay, perfect.
Wanna do a
Then we can
couple more?
speed run these.
Yeah.
Okay, from PJ stands for Paper Jam. My partner claims that Cheez-Its and Goldfish are basically the same thing. Agree or disagree?
That's the wrongest thing I've ever heard. Most wrong. That like broke my capability for speaking. Right? That they are so far away from one another in cheese taste and texture. That's wild. It's a wild thing to say.
Well, to each their own.
I like them both, but they're not the same thing.
All right, from Mystic Eddie T. What were your favorite internet rabbit holes to enter growing up?
Oh, I don't want to name it because I know it's still out there and I'm sure there's like all kinds of objectionable content on it, so I'm not going to do it. But I did read I want to say this is probably the year 1999 or maybe the year 1998. I would look at a Final Fantasy fan website and they created funny scripts. It's proto Homestucky in some way.
Yeah.
Again, I will not speak about Homestuck, but it has that flair. But it was written in the character. It was kind of fanficky. It was written in the characters, in the voice of characters from Final Fantasy. And so that was the real deep dive that I would go into and like learn about these people's very, specific ideas about what these characters were. And then, of course, it immediately swerved into like sexual content. So
Great.
yeah, but that was probably like a website that was really, like a thing that I was really into.
Yeah, there was a website I found in like it might have been 99, 2000, and it was this. I assume it was one guy, and it was pre Wikipedia or pre like any kind of means to search this stuff. And what it would be these constant little blogs on the meaning of metal songs.
Oh.
And to give you an idea, a lot of these were based on Tool songs, so that should give you like a rough idea of the kind of person involved in this. And there would just be this constant thing of like, oh, this song means this because this happened here and this happened here. And you would it's like it's a classic warning tale about like digesting knowledge on the internet, because I'm young and impressionable and reading this stuff being, really? That doesn't seem right, but okay, like that's interesting. And then I find out like 4 or 5 years later, it was just complete, like all of it was just bullshit. Like this dude was just making stuff up. But he was so comprehensive about the myth making and stuff that I like to think it wasn't malicious. I like to think he just was his receptors were just off, and he would listen to this Tool song that was clearly about something else and be like, actually, I think it's about this. 800 words later, like publish, and it's out there on the internet, and I'm some like idiot 19-year-old being like, oh, that's interesting. So yes, thank you Wikipedia and actual digitized interviews with the band Tool for like being able to shake all that shit out of my memory banks.
Yeah, it kind of calls forward to how people do things now as well. Although I think it's now maybe like a little bit more calculated in that I think that a lot of people perform comprehensiveness in order to get their ideas across. Like, every YouTube video that's about like proving something or that's like about catching somebody, like, every major like content nuke and scandals, things like that. They're very long, not necessarily because they have that much to say, but because you look at a video and you see 1 hour plus and you're like, oh, then they must have really gone into it. Therefore, their thesis must be correct. So yeah, I can understand why that works on impressionable people, or why it did on you when you were younger, because it still works on people very well.
There's an honesty to Guy on the internet in 1999 that
Yeah.
I yearn for it. I yearn for the like, you know what? I'm going to talk about every Tool song and I'm going to tell you what they're all about. Here we are with no expectation that anyone would know. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you had to have found this through like a web ring or whatever, right? Like harder to search it up. And you're just like, look, I have the authoritative facts going on about what's going on in the, you know,
In
Anima
the mind of
album or
Maynard
whatever.
James Keenan.
Yeah. Hard pass on the mind of
Yeah.
Maynard James Keenan.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't really want to know what's happening in his mind.
No.
No, you don't. You don't want to look into what that guy was up to.
Yeah. All right. From Lady Tauhi. What are your favorite gods in Hades 2? Let's see, can be based on vibes or the quality of boons or both. Am I the only one who's been playing Hades 2 here, or Cameron, have you played any?
No, I don't. I don't play any of these games where you're running around and hitting stuff all the time. I played Diablo when that came out. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm locked in.
Hades, it doesn't have a map, dude. If it doesn't have a map, I'm not playing
True,
it.
true.
So
Yeah, it doesn't
yeah.
have towers. What the fuck?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't have little
Um,
guys I can click around. So no.
Yeah.
there's one little guy you can click around. It's just you. But yeah, okay. So quickly, let's see. I'm a big fan of Hestia and Hephaestus. Hestia is fire. Hephaestus drops big anvils or hammers or something on people. And then a little bit of Demeter, because Demeter can freeze things and slow them down, and that's really nice in a game where you often get it seeks to overwhelm you with just tons of stuff happening. You know, you have at least a degree of control at that point. Those are kind of the three main ones I go for. Apollo and Zeus are both good for damage boosting. They have a lot of like little abilities that can slot in and add more damage. I actually like improved my runs massively recently because of our own Discord. Because people in the Hades Discord were talking, and let's see, I think maybe it was Mectroid. It was somebody who was doing like the rough math on how the game works, and they pointed out smartly that the game like points you in the direction of leveling up abilities as you go. You can get like little palms of power that level something up and boost that one ability's damage percentage or output. But the smarter way to play the game is to mostly ignore those and just grab as many different boons from as many different gods as possible, because each of those will augment an ability, and then you just constantly are using all of your abilities at once to maximize damage output instead of leveling them up and scaling them over the course of a run. And that works way better. And also just like it's more fun because you're hitting buttons all the time and slamming into stuff, and you're like, I am so fucking tanked out right now that it doesn't matter. I won't die. And that's how I finally beat Typhon, is by slamming face first into him and having a bigger HP pool and dealing more damage. It's like that was not elegant, that was not strategic, but it felt good. um, all right, let's see. We already did. Oh wait, from I Once Was a Cat. What classic book besides Dante's Inferno should be made into a video game? I think that on the back of the fact that they are now making another Dante's Inferno game, not EA, but like a random indie company, let's just do a third. Let's have 3 Dante's Infernos.
Oh, your my
The,
joke was going to be they should do the Paradiso.
Yeah,
Dante's Paradiso. Everyone always skips the third book in the trilogy.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Let's see.
can I just say what about can we do the Old Testament but as like a collection of WarioWare style mini games?
That was
That's
Asura's
such a good
Wrath. We already talked
idea.
about that.
Yeah.
They did that one already.
That's right. I forgot about that part of the Old Testament that takes place entirely on the moon.
Yep.
Clearly not a learned person.
Yeah. Well, it's been a minute since I opened the Bible, you know.
Mm.
All right.
That's what this game's for. It's going to teach everyone who has never actually opened the Bible. Oh wow, I didn't know you could survive 40 years in the desert by mashing the A button repeatedly.
All right. From Ghost then. Has anyone played or heard of Battlesuit Aces? Any thoughts on the game? If so, I've heard of it. It's from the people who made that, like, what was that game called? It was kind of like not Top Chef. It was like Battle Chef Brigade. Is that the game? Yeah, Battle Chef Brigade.
Trinket Studios? Are you referring to Trinket Studios? Yeah, they made Battle Chef Brigade.
So this is their new game. It's like a mech kind of thing, but it's like a card game. Yeah, which I don't know, it looks interesting, but I'm not really a card game person, so I don't know if I'll get around to checking it out.
Yeah.
But
I'm writing this book on Magic the Gathering now. That's like the next project I'm working on, and I can't look at anything else that has a card in it. I've learned.
yep,
Yeah.
understandable. All right, let's see. From Boolean. Do you have any fun or unique ways when giving out Halloween candy? So I guess of giving out Halloween candy. Since the pandemic, my wife and I give out candy from our second floor balcony via a basket lowered down by rope. Initially, it was done to do our part in social distancing, but the kids loved it so much that we kept we kept it going over the years. That was fun.
I haven't been in I live out in the countryside, which is why that helicopter went over earlier. And so I haven't had a trick or treater ever. And in my previous home, we never had a trick or treater ever. In the apartment I lived in before that, we never had a trick or treater. But if I had to do it, I would shoot it out of a cannon
That'd be so sick, like a
at
t-shirt cannon or something.
yeah, like profound velocity. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Would you like aim it at its intended recipient, or would you like aim it kind of near the ground past them? Like, I feel that there is a chance you could grievously harm someone and then get in trouble. So I'd imagine you're not aiming at them.
I mean, in this scenario that we've constructed, no one's going to get hurt.
Oh,
I would like anime style bounce it off the ground and it would go directly into their little, into their receptacle and they would grab it.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
That'd be
yeah.
sick.
Yeah, it would be great. But yeah, I
Okay.
haven't seen a trick or treater in 1,000,000 years. So
So let's see. Treethan in chat mentioned that the protagonist of Battlesuit Aces kind of looks like me, and so I of course had to go see if that's true. Once again, another person profoundly misunderstands what I look like, at least in my own eyes. Man,
yeah,
this
this
happens
appears to
regularly,
be
though. No one has ever brought me someone who they believe looks like me where I agreed. I was like, nope.
Oh, dude, the Clear Obscure one is absolutely nailed on. I can't believe you don't see that.
I think the reason is because
there's a
he looks
video to this,
more
right? The
like
video will be released of this.
uh,
Like people can see him. Okay, I'm gonna make a facial
Yeah.
expression to that. Clear Obscure guy? Nathan?
yeah. See,
No. There's no way.
There we
That's
go.
just Robert Pattinson. They just remade right.
exactly. He
I'm
looks
sorry,
more like
Nathan.
Robert Pattinson.
Nathan, I got big love for you. Whatever.
No, but he
I
looks like
am in.
Robert
You
Pattinson.
do not look like Robert Pattinson.
No,
I don't want to see
think
you
so
be a
either.
Batman. I don't
It's a
need
Venn
you to do any
diagram.
of that.
It's a Venn diagram situation. They're not. It's Nathan doesn't look like Robert Pattinson. Robert Pattinson does look like Claire. What's his Verso?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
Verso's
The
the-
overlap
No,
is the
not
Clear
Verso.
Obscure guy.
Gustav.
Gustav.
Gustav is the main one.
Gustav.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You inhabit the space where Nathan and Gustav are overlapping, not you and Robert Pattinson. I'm gonna have to draw
Yeah.
this now. Fucking hell, I'm gonna have to draw.
Yeah,
it.
you need to
Wait, that'd be
release
great.
like a
Put
chart.
together like a little conspiracy board. There's a bunch of red
Just
thread. and you're
arranged
like-
conspiracy board of red tape going to like dudes who look vaguely like Nathan. Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, maybe someday someone will find a guy who actually looks like me. But so far, even all of our best science, all of our resources have not been able to replicate the unique contours of my face.
Do you think maybe people see you and they just think you're your hair? Because like I could see like
That's the other thing.
the only overlap, Luke, the only overlap between Nathan
Mhm.
and Clear Obscure fella is the hair.
Yep.
The
That's
beard.
it.
Well, I
That's
guess
what
that
I
beard is
wanted to-
hair, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
like percentage-wise, that's a substantial proportion of what people are seeing, though. You usually have a lot of hair and beard, so like proportion of
But
what they're seeing from the
that's
shoulders
true of a
up.
lot. That's an entire phenotype of guy at that point.
Yeah, this is
there
like
are
when
so
I'm out
many
in
of
the
us.
world and people are
It's
like,
a-
"You look like blank blank," and I'm like, "I'm just a white
Right.
man with a beard. Like I don't
Right,
look like a
right.
person at all."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been happening to me for years. Somebody like said that I looked like one of the people in Ninja Sex Party, and I was like, no, he just has a lot of curly hair, and that's it. That's all you're drawing on. I think people just don't understand what anybody actually looks like. I think that's actually a hilarious problem for a species to have when our main thing is identifying people pretty immediately on facial characteristics. But here we are.
My Halloween scenario is I would like to be like the start of Mad Max, where I would like to gather all the children from the neighborhood all at the front of my house at once, and then get them all worked up, and then push a big lever and all the candy flies out of these pipes for like 6 seconds, and then I turn it off again, and they all have to
You
fight
just like
over
fire
whatever
hose
comes.
them.
Yeah, and that's it. And then I'm wearing a skull mask and I'm cackling, and then I go back inside, and that's it. I'll see you all next year for next year's Halloween.
That's cool.
Oh.
That's good. You could do that. That's
Yeah.
that's
I just need to
reasonable.
build. I
Actually.
just need to build the pipes.
Yeah. Just
Yeah,
build the candy pipe.
yeah.
And I do think the promo is going to be pretty hard. Where you're like, all right, all the children come to my home at once. That's
Yeah.
going to be kind of hard. You really
Yeah,
need
it's
to
a
get
little
parents on board
questionable.
first, I think.
Have you seen
yeah.
the children's movie Mad Max? It's like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, starring beloved child star Mel Gibson. Yeah, it'll go great.
Oh, it's the Tom Hardy one. It's the water scene from the start of the Tom Hardy.
Oh,
one,
okay. You
where
mean specifically from the Tom Hardy one?
I mean
Okay, gotcha,
specifically
gotcha.
from the Tom Hardy one. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, on that note, I think that's going to be the end of our show for today. Cameron, where can people find you?
I'm on Blue Sky, the people's platform, the platform with great moderation choices.
Yeah, I was going to say, by the people's platform, you mean like the people who
By
really
three
suck
people's
a lot,
platform,
the
yeah.
libertarian people who have just lost their
Yeah.
minds in the past
Hell
couple
yeah,
weeks.
they're doing it
Yeah.
over there. Yeah, really. What a time to be alive. You can find me there. You can find me at ckunzelman.com. My book is people are receiving it currently. Like I have a copy, and lots of people keep sending me messages that they got their copy. It's not out yet. It's not out until somewhere maybe the first week in November. But if you go to my website or the University of Minnesota Press website and look for Everything is Permitted, you can pre-order it and it will come to your house fairly soon, way before the actual release date. So if you want it right now, you'll be able to do that. And someone not named Jeff Bezos will get more of your money. So I encourage you to do that. But yeah, it's at ckunzelman.com. If you go there right now, I even have a discount code, I think, for 30% off. So that's a great way to go and get it if you want to read this book. It is, let me give you the pitch really quickly. Not the pitch, but the run, because people care about this. It's 232 pages.
Oh,
So it's not
yeah,
the world's
it's
biggest
fairly,
book.
yeah, it's pretty breezy.
I've read it more than one time, because you have to do that when you write a book, and
Yeah.
I'm not embarrassed by it, which is like that's a good place to be in. When you read
You're
your own
reading it
writing
again
from
on a higher difficulty.
Yeah.
that's right.
Now,
You know what I mean?
here's the
Yeah.
real challenge, though. Read it again in like another year.
Yeah, I
and
won't be
then see
doing
if you're
that.
embarrassed.
I will not be
Because
doing
either you will have rose-colored glasses about it, or you'll be like, "Oh man, what was I thinking? Why did I write this way? Why was this my writing style?" Like, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I promo for a previous book. I wrote a
Mm.
previous book called The World is Born from Zero. It's on science fiction games. Not going back and reading that one. Wrote that in like 2019. Not don't need to revisit at all. But people can check that out. You can get if you want to read me talking about science fiction games and games and speculation. I think that book is a $19 paperback. So it's very affordable and written in a similar way. If you've read my games criticism before, or if you read Aftermath regularly or anything like that, it is written for you. So you can check both of those books out. Yeah, we do. Last thing, I'm part of Ranged Touch. We're a podcast
Yeah.
network, and we make all kinds of stuff. And we have several different shows. We have Game Study Buddies about academic game studies, and then we just talk about it. So you don't need to read the books; you can just listen to us talk. And if you like it, you can go read the book. We have Shelved by Genre, where Michael Lutz and Austin Walker and I, we talk about genre literature. We are in the middle of Saga the Swamp Thing right now, and we're about to start From Hell. We're doing an Alan Moore unit. And we have several other shows as well. But those we have Just King Things, where we're talking about Stephen King and publication order. November is Face in the Crowd, a novella he co-wrote about baseball. Not going to be good, I don't think. But the one that we just did was The Wind Through the Keyhole, which is like a Dark Tower novella that was really good. So you can check out Just King Things if you like Stephen King and you want to know more about what he was up to for his whole career.
Excellent. Well, this has been Aftermath Hours, a podcast of aftermath.site. If you liked what you heard, you can subscribe at aftermath.site/products. We record this live on Twitch every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and we'll be back doing that next week. But until then, have a good one.